do this question on your own before you look at the video solution. Okay, so it says city council member is saying something. What is he saying? Demand for electricity has been increasing by 1.5% a year. Okay, so the demand is for electricity is increasing. It has been increasing from the past. Okay, so it's been going on 1.5% a year, and there simply is no more space to build additional power plants to meet future demand increases. Okay, so whatever has happened so far, probably we have managed to do that. But now there is no more space to build additional power plants to meet future demand increases. So if it goes on increasing by 1.5% a year, we can't build additional power plants because there is no space. Okay, we must therefore begin to curtail or reduce usage. Okay, so we can't just go on keep increasing our demand at 1.5% a year. We have to really now stop because there is no space to build additional power plants. That's what the argument is. So therefore, on that basis, we are saying, okay, we must therefore begin to curtail usage. Okay, which is why I propose passing ordinances requiring energy conservation measures in all city departments. Okay, so on that basis, that person is saying, now we can't really manage to we can't afford this increases, so we have to begin to curtail usage. And on that basis, since we have to curtail usage, he is proposing that let's pass ordinances requiring energy. So essentially he's asking to pass laws to require energy conservation measures in all city departments. So there are various gaps in this argument. First of all, just because you can't build additional power plant doesn't mean that you have to curtail usage, right? There may be other ways to get to satisfy your power demands. You could get it from somewhere else, or even the existing power plants could be able to meet the demands. And secondly, even if you have to curtail usage, why do you have to pass these ordinances, especially asking the city departments to uh, conserve energy, right? You could ask other people also. Okay, so let's look at the questions. I would say the city council member, this guy, the author here, proposal assumes which of the following. So we have to find the assumption in the above proposal, right? So he's first concluding that we must begin to curtail usage. Then he's proposing that, okay, let's pass these ordinances. Option A says existing power plants do not have the capacity. Since it's a negative statement, I'll actually negate it right away. Existing power plants have the capacity to handle all of the projected increase in demand for electricity. Okay, so these existing power plants have the capacity to handle all of the projected increase. If existing power plants have the capacity to handle all of the projected increase, then why do we need to curtail usage or pass these ordinances? So this completely breaks down the argument. Okay, so option A is the assumption because the negation is completely breaking down. The existing power plants can handle all of the projected increase, so no need for this. Okay, option B. No city departments have implemented energy conservation measures voluntarily. Okay, this supports the argument because if nobody is doing it voluntarily, you have to pass ordinances now, right? These guys are so irresponsible. So, but let's say if I negate it, some city departments have implemented these measures voluntarily. Okay, some have implemented these measures on their own, but others may not have, and these may not be enough, right, for you to curtail usage. So it still makes sense to pass ordinances. So the negation is not breaking down the argument. And secondly, even if a lot of departments have implemented these measures voluntarily, you may still want to measure or you may still want to pass these ordinances because you may want to require them, right? They are doing it voluntarily today, but tomorrow they feel, yeah, it's so hot, let's turn on the acs, right? So you may need to have ordinances even then, right? So it wouldn't break down the argument. It still makes sense to have ordinances. So the negation is not breaking down, so it's not an assumption. Option C, passing ordinances designed to curtail electricity usage. these passing ordinances, it's a negative statement, so I'll negate it right away. These passing ordinances will have negative consequences, economic consequences for this. Okay, that's fine, but they may have negative consequences. But the point is, the whole point still remains that we don't have the capacity to build power plants, so it makes sense to have these ordinances, right? It may have negative economic consequences, so what? We still have to go ahead because just there is no space. So negation is not breaking down the argument. So it's not an assumption. Option D, residential consumers, again negative statements, are responsible. So residential consumers are responsible for the recent increases in demand for electricity. Right? So demand has been going up by this 1.5% a year, and now we are saying residential consumers are responsible. Okay, so these consumers are responsible. So a lot of people now start thinking, oh, if these guys are responsible, then it's so unfair to ask the city departments to implement energy conservation measures. This is so wrong. Then we should ask these guys. No, again, it's not like that. Right? It's uh, which person or which department you ask to cut electricity does not only depend whether that department is essentially or that group of customers is essentially really leading to the increases in demand, right? Probably residential consumers just cannot curtail usage, right? And so it's not that residential consumers are responsible, so it does not make sense. Okay, it is still logical to ask your city departments to require energy conservation measures. Okay, so some people are increasing the demand, so you ask other people who are in your control, right? Your city departments are in your control, so you ask them to require energy conservation measures. Okay, so residential consumers are responsible for the recent increases. uh, it is not breaking down the argument at all. Secondly, they are responsible for the recent increases. It could be that for the last 3 years they are responsible for the increases in demand for electricity, but the 7 years before that, right? If I consider the last 10 years, then for the last 3 years, these are responsible for the recent increases, but probably 7 years before that, the city departments were responsible, right? It is entirely possible. So even in that case, it's also moral to ask these people to require to have energy conservation measures. Okay, but even if let's say these consumers were responsible for all the for all the increases in demand for electricity, it is still sensible to ask your departments to have energy conservation measures. It would still not break down the argument. So this is not an assumption. Option E, city department that successfully conserve energy. Okay, now we are talking about city department that successfully conserve energy will set a good example for residential industrial consumers. So this could be a strengthener in a way that yeah, if you require these people to conserve energy, then actually these this will set a good example for others also. So it's a good thing. But this is not necessary, right? Whether they set a good example or not, it's right. You still need them to conserve energy because we don't have space, right? So its negation, it may strengthen the argument, but its negation is not breaking down the argument, so it's not an assumption. So option A is the answer.